Joining us now as we look at live pictures of Cairo, Time Magazine's managing editor, Rick Stengel, who is here to reveal the latest issue of Time Magazine. Good to have you back.
Thanks.
I'm not surprised at the cover.
Yes,
and one
subject
word
of the hour.
Yeah.
Great piece by Fareed Zakaria, I think the world's preeminent expert on the Middle East, about what's going on not only in Egypt, but across the whole Middle East.
Mm-hmm. What does it mean for the Middle East?
Well, he's hopeful, and there are these two schools of thought that, democracy cannot flower in the Middle East versus those who think there can be a Middle East version of democracy. And Fareed is in the latter camp. He thinks that there can be a democracy in Egypt. He's confident about the military. He feels the fact that the military is secular and wants to preserve security is a good thing. He sees this as a real historical moment in the Middle East, bringing, in some ways, fruition to the Bush freedom agenda, and then the more kind of moderate Obama version of it. And now people in the Middle East are taking up that challenge.
Tom Daschle, revolution in the Middle East may be very good for the people of Egypt, but in realism terms, it may not be great for U.S. foreign policy.
Well, Joe, this is a very uncertain time. All the players are changing. The circumstances are changing. Obviously, we're going to have to recalculate as we go. And as we said earlier, there really is no one to whom we can turn at this point for guidance in all of this. This is going to be seat of the pants for a while. And as it does, I think we're going to continue to see this kind of foment all over the Middle East. What happens and where it goes and what it ultimately means for us is still unclear.
But Senator, I think you would agree. I mean, one of Fareed's points is that, in a way, this is the first post-American revolution, that they're not looking to us for guidance particularly, that what's going on in the Middle East is something that's happening independent of the U.S., independent even of what everyone had always said was the linchpin of Middle East policy, what's going on between Israel and Palestine.
That's so true.
So I think, in a way, what's interesting for us is the challenge is what happens when we're not actually a primary actor anymore.
Now, you say independent of the United States, but there is no doubt Condi Rice in 2005 went to Cairo and gave a speech talking about the need for freedom. I remember Mubarak's regime throughout the mid 2004-2005 being visibly irritated by Bush's freedom agenda. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Barack Obama went to Cairo in 2009, delivered the speech he gave, and now we don't see American flags burning in the streets in a way that, to be really blunt,
right,
you would expect a country who held up this regime for 30 years.
Well, one of the points that Fareed makes is that what the Bush freedom agenda was something that ideologically and philosophically he supported. The problem was the Bush actual agenda in terms of politics, the invasion of Iraq,
right,
fought with the freedom agenda. Obama has had a more kind of moderate and controlled version of the Bush freedom agenda, and I think it has had an effect in Egypt. He makes the point, and he quotes, there's a fabulous quote from de Tocqueville, where he says, de Tocqueville said, the most dangerous time for any bad government is when it begins to reform itself. The point about Egypt is they've had 3 or 4 great economic years in a row. They've been reforming themselves economically. They had 6-7% GDP growth for the last few years. There's a revolution of rising expectations, right? That is, in a way, that's the virtue and that's the problem for Mubarak, that people expect more now.
And Mike, the problem is not only for autocrats in the Middle East. Countries like China also have a reason to worry, where economic reforms move ahead of political reforms, expectations rise, and that's why you have China banning searches like Egypt on Twitter.
Expectations and people's exposure to their own larger expectations through the internet, through Twitter, through Facebook. My question to you, Senator, is part of the degree of difficulty here in understanding what's going on in Egypt, does it have to do with our self-definition of democracy here? We think democracy here can be exported. There'll suddenly be a League of Women Voters chapter opening in Cairo. But democracy is a process. It's not a result, is it not?
Mike, that's exactly right. And, I was thinking there is a silver lining in all this. 25 years ago, we created something, and I was involved in this in Congress, the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs and the International Republican Institute, to create the foundations of democracy in all of these countries. It's not going to be League of Women Voters, but it really is. We've got presence on what we call a second track in all of these countries who have worked for years and years to help build these democratic institutions at the earliest stages and to find these people ultimately who will be running government. I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing at all of the levels within these countries today, and I think you're going to see that investment pay off. We aren't directly involved as a country, but we support the NDI and the IRI in a way that I think could pay really big dividends.
Oh,
Rick, really quick, just given the latest news about journalists and them being focused on to an extent there, and some attacks on journalists in the past 24 hours. As a news organization, how do you make a call?
Yes, well, actually, I wrote my editor's letter about the duress and the attacks that our people have been under. We had 2 photographers who were held at gunpoint by the military yesterday. I mean, it does seem as though, even though they're talking a kind of more politic line, you know, the Egyptian government seems to believe the revolution shouldn't be televised or photographed or reported on. So I think it's dangerous, but I don't think it's the point where we have to bail out.
All right, Rick Stengel, thank you. The new cover of Time magazine is Revolution and what it means for the Middle East.
And just here's a little tidbit you will learn if you read Time magazine this week. U.S. taxpayers pay $3.5 million a day on the Egyptian military.
Okay.
To buy our weapons.
Buy our weapons.
It's
terrific.
It's a deposit.
It is the circle of life that is about to come to an end for
it's a stimulus package.
Oh, Lord.